Good morning. I hope you enjoyed watching last week's baptisms. That was the result of a sovereign work of God in people's hearts, drawing them to Jesus, changing their lives. But many of them, including the three unexpected baptisms, were also the result of a lot of hard work from Ray Forsey and her team of volunteers at the Act 2 Cafe, where they've spent many hours serving people and building relationships with them. In Isaiah 58, God calls his people to share their food with the hungry and to provide shelter and clothing to those who need them. In fact, let me just read part of what it says there in Isaiah 58. God says this, he says, "If you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. And you will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail." We've been praying for revival, but if we will serve those who are in need, the broken, the vulnerable, the poor, then God says we will be like that well-watered garden. What a beautiful image of the church, like a flourishing oasis, full of life in the midst of a desert, where we will never lack the supply of his Spirit, his living water. C.H. Spurgeon's church was like that in London in the mid-19th century. They saw thousands of conversions. And in fact, he said this. He said, a church, he said, that does not exist to take the side of the poor, he says, and to denounce injustice and hold up righteousness is a church that has no right to be. That's why I want to encourage us at this time to continue to look for opportunities to serve those who are in need. As we're gathering on Sundays to worship and to build each other up and experience God's presence, please let's not make that the only goal, right? God is glorified when we are strengthened so that we can go and strengthen others, right? God is glorified when we bless one another so that we can go and be a blessing to others. God is glorified when we receive from him so that we can then go and pour out our lives for the sake of others. So I just want to encourage you today to get involved in some of the ways in which we're already serving in our communities, like the Act 2 Cafe, where they need more volunteers as they continue to expand this great work. Also in Portsmouth Public Housing, where we're running a Saturday kids club that needs volunteers. Or what about Lydia's House of Hope in Somersworth? I'll give you contact details for those three at the end if you'd like to find out more. But maybe God is calling you to serve in another area of need in your city, in which case, go do it, because there may be others who will join you. For some people, it might simply be serving one person, like an elderly neighbour or a single mum. Or it might mean serving a whole group of people, like refugees or people with disabilities. It might mean joining an organisation that's already doing a great work in your community, or starting your own where you see a need. But let's be serving those around us, building relationships with people who are in need, because that is where God is working. And that is what Christ did for us, right? It's because we were broken. It's because we were in great need that Jesus gave himself for us. So I'm going to leave you now with Craig Walsh. He's the Executive Director for Portsmouth Public Housing. And he's just going to say a few words about how what we are doing can make a difference in people's lives.
In order to really be successful, you have to change people from being passive bystanders to being ones that are actively influencing their community. And the first step in that is that you have to have each other as resources. You have to have some social capital in the community, and to build that up is really hard work. But it requires a lot of love, a lot of consistency, and some hard work. But putting together a tribe of people that can wrap themselves around some of these folks who, for one reason or another, have been passed over, or are in despair, or are lacking the slack, or the tools to be able to advocate for themselves and get themselves, when they want to, up and out of the circumstances that they're in. And I think that what New Frontiers and the volunteers at New Frontiers have done by bringing people out, for people have stopped being the passive bystanders that they once were, and are now interacting with each other's kids and supporting each other, and then are connected to some others who have some personal and professional networks that can provide the kind of support that they need to get a little bit of slack. Sometimes you can't take risk, you can't do anything new or anything that's a stretch if you're living right on the edge and you've got no slack. So sometimes just a little bit of help from some people that care, that through a meal or through some other way to create a little slack so they can reach up to the next rung, is critical in the whole equation. And that's the kind of work that New Frontiers and the great people there are doing. On behalf of the board of directors and of the Portsmouth Housing Authority and the staff, we just thank everybody who participates. I mean, the consistency, there's a lot of people who want to help. There's a lot of good soldiers in this city who do want to lend a hand, but the ones that really understand what it takes to make a difference are the ones that show up over a long period of time and develop the kind of relationships with our residents that they do. So we're always so grateful for that.